I want to go back to Ryan Nobles just briefly here because, Ryan, part of this moving forward, as Monica laid out, is does Kamala Harris, in fact, end up taking the top of the ticket? If she does, who ends up as her running mate? And if she does not, who else could be in the mix? And there is a slew of names that have been widely speculated about ever since the pressure started to build after that first presidential debate at the end of June. We're talking about people like Gavin Newsom, like Gretchen Whitmer, like Josh Shapiro, like Andy Beshear, like Mark Kelly. Talk us through some of what you've heard and the response from these folks, because many of them are out with statements just late today. Very few of them are coming out with a full-throated endorsement of Kamala Harris just yet, as you're taking a look here at those potential Democratic contenders, Ryan.
Yeah, in fact, to your point, Hallie, the one person on that list that you mentioned, I believe you mentioned him, was Mark Kelly, who is a potential running mate for Kamala Harris. He comes from a swing state of Arizona. He obviously has a very compelling life story as a former astronaut, the husband of Gabby Giffords, who was nearly murdered in an assassination attempt when she was a member of Congress, now represents the state of Arizona. He is out with a full-throated endorsement of Kamala Harris. He says that she is the right person to defeat Donald Trump and lead our country into the future, and that she has his support for the nomination. So Mark Kelly's a potential name on that list. You mentioned others. I think a strong possibility could be Roy Cooper, the governor of North Carolina. North Carolina is a state that Barack Obama was able to win twice, but Donald Trump has gone on to win twice. It's a state that Democrats would love to put in play during this potential presidential election, especially if they start to bleed a little bit with that northern blue wall, the kind of Midwest Rust Belt wall, which Joe Biden was able to sweep last time around. Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, is on that short list of someone that could not only potentially be a running mate, but also could potentially be at the top of the ticket if the process is open. That's certainly a name that people would point to. I think Andy Beshear in Kentucky, who is a moderate Democrat, comes from what is a ruby red state, would be at least a compelling story, right? To have somebody from the middle of the country, represents a lot of working class white voters in particular. That's an area where Democrats have seen their numbers bleed quite a bit. He would also be someone that would be a great compliment to Kamala Harris, and also somebody who is young. And it's interesting, Hallie, how just in the last 3 hours, the conversation of this race has flipped completely upside down. Democrats were trying to convince the country for quite a while that an 81-year-old man was fully capable of still running this country. Now they find themselves running against a nominee who pretty much under any circumstance, with any of these names that have been floated as a possible nominee, will be much older than any of them. So you could have a young, dynamic ticket when you take in Kamala Harris and Andy Beshear, and juxtapose that against someone like Donald Trump. Of course, J.D. Vance is someone who is also young. So there are a long list of potential opportunities for Democrats here. The direction that they go in will play a big role in how this process plays itself out going forward. And I do have to say, Hallie, and I think this is an important thing to keep in the back of our minds as we continue to report this out. It's really congressional Democrats that drove this process, right?
That's right.
There obviously was a long list of concerns among the Democratic hierarchy the day after that debate, which is now almost a month ago. But it was congressional Democrats who started sounding the alarms right away. I remember being on the air with you when you interviewed Congressman Lloyd Doggett, who stuck his nose out there first as the one saying that the party should seriously consider moving in a different direction. And then it was a slow drip, drip, drip of members of Congress who kept this an active conversation. When President Biden came out the Monday after the debate and forcefully said that he was staying in the race, that wasn't enough for congressional Democrats. After the assassination attempt on former President Trump, when it looked like there was going to be another opportunity for these calls to subside and perhaps President Biden could hang on to the nomination, congressional Democrats were not satisfied. They were the ones that were looking at their internal polling that was blaring red lights of concern, not just on the national ticket, but for these down ballot races, and the real possibility that if President Biden stayed at the top of the ticket, they were in danger of losing the White House, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. And they just did not let it go. And that ultimately, I think, became the pressure point that made it very difficult for President Biden to move forward. And the reason I bring this up is because I think this past practice could be indicative of future results, in that I do believe that it will be congressional Democrats that will be the loudest voices in determining who the next leader of the Democratic Party will be. We've seen those that have come out and supported Kamala Harris do that in a very forceful and affirmative way. I think it'll be very difficult to overcome that. But I do think it's worth looking at congressional Democrats as kind of the indicator of the way this process plays itself out, because they were the ones that asserted themselves and really led to this change.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.